All right. So, once again, for those who have just tuned in, my name is Lesia. I am a licensed spiritual practitioner here at the Center for Spiritual Living Victoria. We are coming to you online today, and we are so delighted and so grateful that you are here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, we continue with this month's theme, the power of awakening. And in starting that, I just wanted to bring up the three main tenets of the science of mind and spirit teachings, just as a reminder. Excuse me. So the first one is there is only one thing going on. Call it God, source, energy, universal mind, spirit, love, light, whatever is meaningful for you, there's only one. And because there is only one thing going on, it stands to reason that everyone and everything is that one thing. And not just in part, not a part of, but in its entirety. So that means you, that means me, that means our time together, this celebration that is unfolding. It means the computer, the mountains, the stars, the sun, the sky, the moon, the insects, everyone and everything. And the third thing is that we live according to spiritual laws, the main one being the law of cause and effect, which could also be construed as a scientific law. Ultimately, we create our reality based on what we think and what we believe. Now, as many of you know, for this past year, since September, I have been in what counts as my first year of ministerial studies, but it is not the way that I had expected it to be. What I've been doing is I've been in the very first advanced consciousness studies class as offered through the Emerson Theological Institute in California, which is being taught by Dr. James Mellon of the Global Truth Center, Los Angeles, who was also my teacher for spiritual practitioner studies leading up to this year. And to say that this class has been an expansive, life altering experience would be an understatement of mammoth proportions. It is something that has made its way into every single conversation, every single relationship, every single podcast that Glenn and I have hosted since the start of it, conversations I have in my work, conversations with friends. It is something that has been so incredibly impactful that I now see the world in a whole new way. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we have been immersed in quantum physics for most of this year. And the book that we have been reading and are finishing now, finally, for the past few months, I don't know if everybody can see this, okay, is The Quantum Revelation by Paul Levy. Now, Glenn and I had the opportunity to interview Paul Levy in our podcast about a month ago, and it was such a great conversation, and it was such a joy, such a delight, and such an honor to meet him, because this book is the one book so far this year that we've been reading, studying, talking about, that everybody is loving, that everybody is just being completely blown apart, stretched, pulled, and changed in so many different ways continually. Each individual, us as a collective, and then this change and this alteration of life and worldview is just filtering out into our respective worlds. So, what I wanted to do today was I wanted to kind of talk about the three main takeaways for me so far of this class and quantum physics, and then kind of compare them with science of mind and spirit. So, the first thing that really, really, really sort of has opened my mind to seeing the world in a new way, and it's something that we talk about constantly, is that there is no objective reality that exists outside of ourselves. The second is that the reality we experience is our own. There are no two realities that are alike. So, my experience of reality, even though it seems like you and I are experiencing the same thing, my experience is different from your experience. And that those experiences of reality are always changing from moment to moment to moment. And the third thing, and this has kind of been really, really, really incredible for me in terms of spiritual mind treatment, is that the one thing that we talk about that is the thing that is going on, call it God, source, spirit, universal mind, whatever is meaningful for you, it's not so much a thing as it is activity, as it is interconnectivity, as it is an ongoing creative process in and as everyone and everything. So, my talk title for today is We're Dreaming, Wake Up. And what I want to do is I'd like to start by reading a quote from the Quantum Revelation by Paul Levy. And it's from page 214, and it goes like this. Dreaming ourselves up to be subject to the world, we truly suffer from a case of mistaken identity, unnecessarily limiting ourselves in the process. He writes further, dissociated from our own creative agency, the world then seems to create our experience for us, with ourselves playing the role of the passive and often victimized witness. Seeing the world in this disempowering way, we then dream up all the evidence we need to prove to us the rightness of our point of view in a self-fulfilling prophecy that further alienates us from one another, our world, and our true selves. Now, when I read this, and as I read this again and again and again, there are a few key words that jump out at me. And the phrase that really comes out is self-fulfilling prophecy. And when we think of self-fulfilling prophecy in terms of science of mind and spirit, we're talking about something called secondary causation. And secondary causation, or self-fulfilling prophecy, is when we end up creating our reality from what we're experiencing around us, from what's going on, from what is known, from what is familiar, rather than from that infinitude that Reverend Jennifer was talking about in her meditation this morning, as what Reverend Joanna was talking about in her treatment. It's that infinite potentiality of the quantum field, where everything is possible. And so, instead of creating from that, we end up focusing on what's going on around us. And even those of us who are steeped in the science of mind and spirit teachings, this can still happen. And when it's really, really, really prevalent is when there is a collective consciousness that is so strong, that is so profound, it can be very, very challenging to not get continually pulled into that collective consciousness because it is so incredibly strong. So, so what comes to mind for me? There's actually two things. One, when I was jotting down notes for this talk, and then just as I was listening to Reverend Joanna's treatment. And the first thing, it's a bit of a charged topic, and it's something that is at the forefront for everyone, is coronavirus. And so when we look at how this last year and a half has unfolded for the world, our planet, even not just the people, but nature and everything else that's going on, there is this collective agreed upon dream, if you will, that we have all, in a sense, bought into on some level, that even though those of us who talk about oneness, and this is what we immerse ourselves in and what we endeavor to live from and as, there's still this notion that the coronavirus is something separate from ourselves, that the COVID-19 experience, that the unfoldment of it all is something that is happening to and around us that we don't necessarily have some part in. And so in taking this class, in really, really, really sort of diving into the idea that the quantum field is infinite potentiality, and that, even if we think in terms of science of mind, that we get to create as that allness of being, that infinite expanse of universe, but we still end up inadvertently choosing to create from what's going on around us. This is what Paul Levy is talking about in those paragraphs that I just read. This is the self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's not to say that, this is meant to be a judgment or a criticism. It's a, why do we do it? Like, why are we so fascinated? Like, why is it that we end up choosing to focus on, instead of the fact that more people haven't gotten COVID than people have. And out of the people that have gotten it, most of them have survived versus the ones who have died. And so it's not to trivialize the people who have gotten it, or the severity of it, or the measures that have been taken to sort of, combat it, if you will. But the curiosity for me lies in, if we are really, really, really interested in and believe that we create our own reality, what is our part in creating the COVID experience? Now, the other thing that also came up for me as I was listening to Reverend Joanna's treatment, and just sort of, coming into today, is the words Center for Spiritual Living. And And it sort of hit me a few weeks ago as I was thinking about it, as I kept hearing again about how we would love for our community to grow and we would love to have more people coming in our doors. And people are so looking forward to getting back together in person at the beginning of July. That the Center for Spiritual Living, it is a worldwide organization and it is an actual place. But ultimately, it's kind of like the experience around us. Ultimately, what the Center for Spiritual Living is, it's us. It is within us. It is that inner presence, that incredible power and profundity that is the wellspring, the vitality, and infinite potentiality of life. That's the Center for Spiritual Living. What would happen if we turned our attention on that Center for Spiritual Living versus the Center for Spiritual Living, sort of the place that we go to on Sundays, the community that we get together with on Sundays? What if we put our attention inwards? So that's just something that kind of popped up, as I was listening today and has sort of been swirling around in my mind. So all of this kind of comes to, it's ours to choose. And the thing is, we're not just at choice, we're choosing all the time. It is just an ongoing activity. And sometimes we are choosing with awareness, and sometimes we are choosing unconsciously. Joe Dispenza says, where we put our attention is where we put our energy. Ernest Holmes says, what we focus on expands. So my question is, what do you want to focus on? Do you want to focus on the familiar, or do you want to focus on the new? Do you want to focus on the known, or do you want to focus on the unknown? Do you want to focus on the same old, or do you want to focus on what's possible? The infinite possibilities, the infinite potentialities of the quantum field that is who and what we innately are. So, to do this, it is imperative for us to wake up from the idea that reality is something happening out there, to knowing, like embodying, that we are creating our reality from in here, from within. Which brings us to the second point, that the reality we experience is our own. There are no two realities that are shared, and the realities that we experience are always changing from moment to moment to moment. They're actually, even though it seems like it, there's no continuity. The universe and we are being refreshed and recreated anew every single moment of every single day. And what we're aware of is the reality that we're in is only one of infinite possibilities and simultaneously occurring realities at any given time. So if you think about the fact that, say like you're born from 0 to 120, you live a life. It is not this one continuous reality that you are experiencing. You are experiencing infinite realities throughout that lifetime. And because there are infinite realities occurring simultaneously, it is completely possible for you to leap from one reality to another, to another, to another, or to even draw from another. Because by just thinking that there is a possibility of experiencing something other than what you're experiencing right now, that thought is available because that thought exists in another reality, because it exists in the quantum field as possibility to begin with. How empowering and powerful is that? That's how I feel anyway. For some people, I know that it can feel kind of scary because all of a sudden the notion that, I'm the one who's really controlling my life can be a bit daunting and overwhelming. But if we get past, our ego who wants to protect us and say, hey, you know what? We know what's going on this side. Like, let's just stay here. It's comfortable here. We're familiar with happening, rather than thinking, you know what? I value and appreciate wanting to be protected, but I'm also curious enough to go over, into the unknown, to dip my toes outside of my comfort zone, to experience something new, because I know just by virtue of being who and what I am, that I am not only capable of more, but I am meant to live and experience more in this lifetime. So, in talking about this, it just makes me think back to my absolute favorite spiritual principle that I have picked up from the Science of Mind and Spirit teachings, one brought forth by Thomas Troward. Principle is not bound by precedent. And that spiritual truth, that spiritual principle, that spiritual realization through the lens of a quantum worldview is even more profound than before, because now it's not just about, you are principle, I am principle, and that is unchanging. Okay, that is the allness of universe. That is that infinite potentiality. Principle is God, is source, is spirit, is love, whatever you want to call it. Precedent is what happened. But in the quantum field, with there being no time, no space, everything happening all at the same time, it's not only what happened, but what could happen. None of it has any bearing on who and what you are at your core. So the idea that principle is not bound by precedent, it just means that we have the power, we are the power to be and do whatever it is we want to be at any given time. And there is no one, no thing, no condition, no experience, no thought, no belief that could ever get in the way, that could ever diminish that allness of being that we are by one infinitesimal nanoscopic iota ever. So that's just one more plug for principle is not bound by precedent. So my question is, if we are this infinitely powerful and creative, why would we continue to choose to focus our attention on waves of possibility to retell and relive the latest sickness or disease, lack of money in our bank account, a long-standing rift in a relationship, anything that falls short of the most extraordinary life we are not only capable of living, but are meant to live? Think about that. Like, if we are this infinite power, why aren't we acting it? Why are we buying into some sort of limitations that either we set up for ourselves or that someone set up for ourselves, when those limitations have absolutely no effect on the principle that we innately are? It's kind of like, you know, sorry. And now I'm going on to point number 3, and that's about oneness. And here, when I was thinking about oneness and how there is, this divine intertwinglement and interconnectivity that is always going on, it makes me think of that beautiful Rumi quote of, I'm not a drop in the ocean, I am the entire ocean in a drop. But now, having been in this quantum class, this immersion, this advanced consciousness studies class, it's almost like the ocean isn't big enough. Like, think about the universe, think about the sun. And so in the quantum revelation, there's another quote that I would love to read on page 272, where Paul Levy writes about the sun. We are not a separate entity from the sun, momentarily sharing the same space. We are the sun. We are the light. After our shift in perspective, the age-old idea that we are composed of crystallized light, that we are stardust, just like Reverend Joanna mentioned in her treatment, makes more sense. Our essential being isn't simply made of light, it is light. The calcium in our bones and iron in our blood are literally forged in the stars. I have goosebumps and I feel so expanded every time I read that paragraph. Every time I think about lying in the sun, being outside, feeling the warmth and the light of the sun on my skin, and then thinking about how not only am I the power of the blazing sun, that is held in the sky, I am that sun. There is no end to me and no beginning to the sun, that I am it and it is me, because everyone and everything is this one incredible, amazing, active, creative, interactive energy that is the essence of all that is, always unfolding, always emerging, always blazing in the sky or blazing, in our reality. That is so profound to me. And I love, 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 love the idea, the notion, the concept that we and the sun are one and the same. So here's another question. If we are the sun, we are the light, we are stardust forged in the stars, why are we still living unconsciously in this collective dream? Why do we behave as if reality is something outside of us, happening independently of us, that ultimately something else is creating our life experience? Why are we unconsciously suffering by focusing on and believing we are limited by our humanness instead of really embodying the infinite power, creativity, and love we innately are? You know, Ernest Holmes, what we focus on expands. So, what are we choosing to focus on? So, the question is, how do we awaken in this collective dream? Well, this reminds me of the answer that Paul Levy gave in our podcast when I asked at the end, you know, if people wanted to get in touch with you or find out more about you, where would they go? And he just kind of paused and said, well, they could go within. And then he gave his website address. But when he said they could go within, that was the answer. You know, it's turn your focus from out here to in here. And what does that look like? It is different for everyone. You know, whether it is some form of meditation, whether it is sitting quietly, whether it is writing, whether it is getting out in nature, whether it is surrounding yourself, you know, or spending time with people or pets that you love, whether it is expressing your creativity, you know, to the point where your heart and soul are just bursting, you know, with love and with vitality and with joy and playfulness. Whatever it is for you, find the things that open up your heart, that open up your soul, that allow you to really tune in here, because ultimately, you know, the power of the blazing sun that is in the sky is the same power that is within each and every one of us, because that's who and what we are. We are the entire ocean in a drop. We are the infinite expanse of universe. That's just what is happening. So it's important that we also, as we do this, you know, what ends up happening is that we begin to realize that we're actually dreaming, that on some level we've bought into this idea that there is some kind of reality that's happening, and that if we were plucked out of this reality, it would just continue going. No, it is up to us to wake up, to awaken and realize that the power of awakening, you know, starts to happen as we realize there is no objective reality. And as we realize there is no objective reality, that reality is something that we are creating through the use of our own minds as we welcome consciousness, you know, to be the infusion as emergence through and as us, that reality is also not a continuous thing, that it is being created and recreated every single moment anew. And because the quantum field is infinite potentiality, everything is possible all the time. And so as we begin to awaken from this collective dream, we begin to realize and agree and accept that there is no objective reality, that we are the ones who are generating and creating and recreating this reality that we are experiencing, and that the reality we're experiencing is infinite in scope. We really, really, really then begin to realize and embody there is no division. There is no separation of time, of space, of people, place, or thing. We really, truly are all one, part and parcel of the ongoing creativity that is the essence, that is the interconnectivity of everyone and everything. So the final quote that I have from the Quantum Revelation is on page 305, where Paul Levy writes, "We can only recognize and experience the undivided wholeness of the quantum realm when we are in touch with the wholeness within ourselves, as the two are reflections of each other." So, my question that I would love to leave us all with is that isn't it time that we all realize that we've bought into this collective dream that reality is something happening outside of us instead of being created from within? Isn't it time we really got in touch with the wholeness within ourselves that is continually being reflected back to us as the sun, as the stars, as the infinite expanse of universe, and begin creating from and as that rather than what's around us? Isn't it time to harness the infinite power and creativity we innately are and live the life we are not only capable of, but are meant to live? Isn't it time we wake up? Namaste.